watching at the end of this video for news of other programmes in the Great Trains series.
The history of the Ffestiniog Railway begins in the early years of the 19th century. At that time, this part of Wales was no more than a remote mountain area, whose inhabitants scraped a meagre living from poor farmland, which gave little promise of industrial wealth. The arrival in the area of William Alexander Maddox in 1798 was to transform the landscape and the lives of the people who lived there. Maddox's adventurous land reclamation schemes almost left him bankrupt. One of them involved the construction of a great embankment known as the Cobb, designed to block off the sea estuary of the River Glaslyn. After 4 years of hard labour, the Cobb was finally completed in 1811. Maddox soon turned his attention to exploiting the infant slate industry and started to develop the area around the present-day Blaenau Ffestiniog. He seized on the chance to create a port for shipping the slate produced in the quarries. Transport to this newly formed port was to be by gravity railway, which began construction in 1828. Reminders of the Stephenson pre-steam style are clearly seen on the Ffestiniog Railway. Notably, the adoption of a route enabling the loaded slate trains to travel down by gravity, and the use of dandy wagons, in which the horses employed to haul the empty slate wagons up the line rode down behind the loaded trains. The gauge adopted was the narrow gauge of 1 foot 11.5 inches, or 597 millimetres, which corresponded to that already used in slate quarries. The wagons were small enough to be easily loaded and manhandled in the quarry and at the port. The slate was transported from the quarries to the railway down long, steep inclines, the remains of which can still be seen today in the Clechfeth slate mines. A visit to these slate caverns in Blaenau Ffestiniog takes us back in time to see slate still being cut by hand. The construction of the railway was by bargain men, using only simple hand tools, horses and black powder. And the official opening took place on the 20th of April, 1836. As the railway began to make a respectable profit with increasing traffic, thoughts turned to the possibility of using steam locomotives and developing the line for passenger traffic. Eventually, in March 1863, a contract for 3 locomotives, later increased to 4, was signed with G. England & Co. By July, the first 2 engines, Princess and Mountaineer, were brought to Carnarvon and thence to Porthmadog by horse and cart. After a few minor teething troubles, they finally went into service on the 23rd of October 1863, to be followed in 1864 by Prince and Palmerston. 125 years later, Prince is the star of the show at a gala weekend to celebrate the introduction of steam onto this narrow gauge line. Back in 1864, the problem of building powerful locomotives for service on lines with sharp curves and steep gradients was exercising the minds of engineers both here and abroad. In 1869, G. England built an example of Robert Fairley's double-bogie articulated locomotive, which featured a 2-engine boiler for the Ffestiniog Railway, number 7, Little Wonder. In trials held in 1870 before the Duke of Sutherland, this locomotive proved to have more than double the power of the earlier engines. The bogie principle introduced by the Fairley design involved the use of flexible hoses to transmit the steam power to the two driving bogies, one at the front and one at the rear of the locomotive. This flexibility enabled the driving bogie to enter a curve and turn before the main body of the locomotive, therefore allowing these larger engines to conquer the sharply twisting tracks of the Ffestiniog Railway. 10 years after the first of these locomotives took to the rails, the railway began construction of their own locomotive to the Fairley patent design. The newly restored Merthin Emrys was built in 1879 at the Boston Lodge Works. On the morning of Saturday the 30th of April, 1988, 109 years after it first rolled out of the workshops, this marvellous example of locomotive engineering receives a final polish before reporting for duty, carrying the many thousands of tourists and railway enthusiasts who've braved the weather to witness history in motion. But alas, things have not always been so prosperous for the Ffestiniog Railway. The start of the Second World War saw the tourists going home, and by the 1st of August 1946, the start of the quarry holidays brought about the sudden closure of the line to all traffic. The Ffestiniog Railway's rolling stock was left where it stood, much of it in and around Boston Lodge and Porthmadog, exposed to vandals, souvenir hunters, and the weather. Name and number plates vanished, as well as valuable scrap metal, and the line largely disappeared beneath trees and bushes. The 1950s saw the first stirring of a new railway era, the preservation movement, which brought professionals and amateurs together to run lines otherwise doomed to closure. Inspired by the first passenger services over the Cobb from Porthmadog to Boston Lodge Halt began. Whilst the railway was slowly working its way back to Ffestiniog on one side of Mole Wind Tunnel, a nationalised giant had been planning to build a power station that would kill any hopes of running trains beyond Ffestiniog. In 1954, just as control of the Ffestiniog railway passed to its new owners, the British Electricity Authority produced a new scheme for a pumped storage layout having the upper and lower reservoirs with a hydroelectric power station in between. The Mole Wind Tunnel is now blocked, its far portal submerged beneath the normal water level of the Llyn Istradau reservoir. The company was determined to build back to Ffestiniog, and the policy adopted was to reopen the vital stopping-off point at Ffestiniog, prove its commercial and tourist value, and get around the reservoir by some means or other. A key event in 1962 was Gerald Fox's do-it-yourself survey for an east side route which brilliantly gained the necessary height by a spiral around Ffestiniog, which would eventually join the old line at Tanna Grishow by running over the dam crest. Undeterred by initial setbacks, the company and its supporters announced in 1964 their determination to build this alternative route with largely volunteer labour. On the 23rd of May 1982, almost 31 years after the first founding of the society, the staff of the Ffestiniog Railway were the first passengers to travel into the new Ffestiniog station. The Ffestiniog was once again a two-ended railway. During the 125 years of steam celebrations weekend, diesel locomotive Conway Castle was in regular service, running the shuttle service from Boston Lodge to Porthmadog across the Cobb. The first shuttle of the morning, however, is to be hauled by Blanche, a 240 saddle tank and tender locomotive. Built in 1893, Blanche originally worked the Penryn Quarry Railway until she was bought by the Ffestiniog Railway in 1963. Arriving at Porthmadog, she's uncoupled from the shuttle and collects her first train of the day, which will depart promptly at 9:45, bound for Ffestiniog. Outside the station buildings at Porthmadog stands an 040 saddle tank locomotive, Welsh Pony, on permanent display. The station buildings are solidly constructed from the local stone and slate, and were built in 1878, next to the picturesque harbour, which is today filled with pleasure craft, a sharp contrast to the slate-carrying freight vessels that used to moor here.
It didn't spray. This is the sat for me.
Immediately upon its departure from Porthmadog station, the railway crosses the 1,600-yard-long Cobb. At the southeastern end stands Boston Lodge Works, built on the site of the quarry that supplied much of the stone used in the construction of this great barrier. The trains then sweep around a long curve and into Boston Lodge Halt. the next station on the line, Minforth, the staff are dressed in period costume to greet the first train of the day. From here, the line runs fairly straight before climbing hard to Penryn. At Penryn Station, we're already high above the valley floor, the river far below us. Between Penryn and Tanabulk, the railway climbs 270 feet in 4 miles, twisting through the forest, around high curves and between narrow, steep-sided cuttings. The arrival at Tanabulk provides a rest for the locomotive and a chance for the firemen to replenish the water tanks. Tanabulk Station was originally opened in July 1873. After the line's reopening, it was the upper terminus for 10 years, until the railway pushed its way through to Theacht. The northern exit from the station is over one of the steepest sections of track, and the small locomotive hauling its long train of coaches fights for traction on the slippery rails. We encounter a deviation, an open spiral that turns the train through 360 degrees and climbs 35 feet to raise the line above the reservoir water level. Bed of the old line is still visible at the base of the new embankment. The train then dives into the 294-yard-long new Goldwyn Tunnel to emerge moments later at the the end of the Tanag Reservoir, the lower reservoir of the new hydroelectric power station. The Central Electricity Generating Board power station at Ffestiniog was opened by Her Majesty the Queen on the 10th of August 1963. It was designed to cope with sudden fluctuations in the main grid and is capable of delivering 360 megawatts in under 1 minute. As the trains of the Ffestiniog Railway pass behind the power station, they cross the large pipes that carry the water to the generators. Nothing of these is visible above ground, the only sign being the extra rails laid outside the 1 foot 11.5-inch gauge to guard against derailment. The deep cutting that follows is summit cutting. From 1842 until 1978, the railway had a continuous downgrade from this point to Porthmadog, allowing the working of loaded slate trains by gravity. The railway then sweeps in a long curve across the Portal Road and Stoolen Road into Tanag, the junction between the original 1836 route and the present-day deviation. The new station was opened on the 24th of June 1978. At the ceremony, a golden spike was driven in to mark the completion of the deviation begun 13 years earlier. Into Ffestiniog station weaves between the houses on the outskirts of the town. After leaving Porthmadog, the first train of the day arrives at Ffestiniog. Here, the locomotive runs around the train and takes on water for the return journey. Ffestiniog is also a junction with British Rail, and the Ffestiniog railway trains make regular connections here with the mainline trains, which provide quite a contrast when seen side by side. During the 125 years of steam celebrations, various indoor and outdoor displays were being held at Minforth Yard and Boston Lodge. These included miniature railways, traction engines, and special equipment used in track maintenance. Minforth Works, Britomart, an 040 saddle tank locomotive built in 1899, was providing hands-on cab rides to the public. Perhaps the most impressive locomotives to work the Ffestiniog rails are the Fairley double-bogie locomotives, designated 0440 side-tanks. Emrys were working hard during the weekend, putting on a fine display for the many photographers who line the trackside. sunshine, awaiting the arrival of the Earl of Merioneth. This interlude provides a perfect opportunity to have a close look at one of these fascinating machines. Earl of Merioneth sweeps over the Tannenwald Bridge and into the station, we get a rare opportunity to see both the oldest and the newest examples of these double fairlies still running in the same station. Second double fairly clears the single-track line, and Merthin Emrys continues its downward journey to Porthmadog. Visiting locomotive Russell, a 262 side tank of 1906 vintage from the Welsh Highland Railway, was kept busy hauling vintage trains, which included in their makeup two of the original four-wheel passenger coaches. Sharing the vintage train work with Russell was Prince, the oldest locomotive on the line, an 040 saddle tank with tender. Built in 1863, it was one of the first locomotives to work the railway. Prince was also the first locomotive to be steamed on the line's reopening in 1955. And on a rainy evening in early September 1957, Prince hauled the first passenger-carrying train from Porthmadog to Tanner Bulk. To commemorate the original application of steam locomotives on the Ffestiniog Railway, a special mixed train containing empty slate wagons was to be hauled by Merthin Emrys at 10:55 on Sunday morning. Before the first shuttle service of the day crossed the Cobb, diesel shunter Upner Castle arrived with the empty slate wagons and began to assemble the special train. Shortly before 11 o'clock, the telltale smoke trail of a steam locomotive working hard rises above the Cobb as Merthin Emrys sweeps into Boston Lodge Curve, emerging moments later through the trees, charging under the Hugh Class Bridge. Past Minforth, the train passes high above Penryn, clinging to the side of the valley. At Tanabulk, the train crosses a skew bridge, constructed with cast iron beams and decorative Gothic-style balustrades. According to the lettering on its beams, it was cast at Boston Lodge in 1854 as a replacement for a wooden bridge. Beyond Tanabulk, the train runs along the hillside above Carrantrip and the artificial lake of Llyn Mire. The empty slate wagons were decoupled from the train at Fiach, and Merthin Emrys arrives in Blaenau Ffestiniog with only the vintage passenger coaches in tow. started Blaenau Ffestiniog, Merthin Emrys, with the remnants of the mixed train in tow, sets off for Porthmadog, providing a spectacular climax to the gala weekend, evoking fond memories of a bygone age as it passes Tanna Grishaw. Thanks mainly to the unwavering devotion of the Ffestiniog Railway Society to the preservation of steam, these glorious locomotives will still be providing pleasure to tourists and enthusiasts alike for many years to come.
Stylus Video presents The Great Trains. In videos of famous railways and legendary locomotives, including this impressive collection of steam, which can be found in the heart of West Yorkshire on the Keighley and Worth Railway. Further north, we join the famous Settle and Carlisle Railway, considered to be the most scenic and spectacular main line in Britain. Come along for the ride. Down in North Wales, we visit the Ffestiniog Railway as it celebrates 125 years of steam. From the other side of the world comes the award-winning film, A Steam Train Passes. This unique Australian documentary is superbly photographed and is simply a must for every enthusiast's video collection. Follow the remarkable journey of the Glacier Express as it snakes its way across Switzerland through picturesque villages and mountain peaks rising to the breathless height of 11,000 feet above sea level. And here comes the 3801. This great Australian locomotive is certainly one of the finest examples from the golden age of steam. The Mallard, the world's fastest steam locomotive. 50 years ago, it reached a speed of 126 miles per hour. Finally, the world-famous Flying Scotsman, photographed in England, Australia, and the USA. The world of the great trains from Stylus Video. Available now from your nearest video station.